Everybody support us, the haters just to show that I'm greater. I'm eating steak and potatoes on the way to Decatur. Maybe there's just a little made up, but you got a little ways up before you can even make up all the ground.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. We're talking about AEW Dynamite from January the 10th, 2023. This part of the video is being recorded before Dynamite, so I'm sure it was one hell of a show, and I'm very excited. I'm very energetic. We'll see how it is later on. We'll see how it is later on. Anyway, so we got a couple of news and notes. One, we're going to do Warner Bros. Discovery. They put out a statement touting AEW. We're going to talk about that because they said they had 4 million viewers. Oh, brother, what on earth what are they talking about? The second part of the news and notes is going to be a question that was asked to Dave Scherer of PW Insider about AEW not having any stars. And I got to say, that's worth discussing. That's worth talking about. So we're going to talk about that too. But first, Warner Bros. Discovery. So Warner Bros. Discovery put out a statement. It was on their website. That says, Warner Bros. Discovery Networks premiered 20 of the 25 highest rated freshman series in 2023, the most of any cable portfolio. So then they go on to tout some of the success of their products. And he says, live telecasts of NBA, NHL, and All Elite Wrestling sports events helped grow TNT, its prime ratings, by 14% among adults 25 to 54. While Adult Swim garnered an 11% prime rating gain versus a year ago. Then they start talking about, what is that, Investigation Discovery? But interestingly enough, they said adults 25 to 54. I was told that only the 18 to 34s matter. That's what I was told by like Tony Khan and Chris Jericho and everybody else that touts AEW's ratings, that the only rating that matters is the 18 to 34. Now, here at Warner Bros. Discovery, like, you know what? It's kind of like 25 to 54. It don't really matter that much anyway, but we're going to talk about this. This ought to be interesting. So, later in the same piece, they tout each individual network and their success. Basically put out what's called performance highlights, what they call. So, it says TNT's ratings among adults 25 to 54 grew 14%. Year over year, with the network maintaining its rank as the #1 cable entertainment network in prime among adults 25 to 54, 18 to 49, and 18 to 34. Popular AEW Dynamite, AEW Collision, and AEW Rampage reached nearly 4 million viewers each week across TNT and TBS. The internet's heads exploded. They were like, what are you talking about? The biggest draw on this network was the Big Bang Theory, which something they do talk about later is how much everybody loves Big Bang Theory. So, I don't know if you guys remember this, but it needs to be said. Brandon Thurston, who rarely is dropping the ball on paying attention to this kind of stuff. He caught them playing this game, I think like a year or so ago, when it comes to how many viewers Dynamite gets. Because we all get the Nielsen ratings, and we all saw how terrible the ratings were last week, and how they started with 1 million viewers and stopped by the time the show was over with a little over 800,000. So they probably lost over 200,000 viewers last week alone. And now people are like, wait a minute, how is you getting 4 million viewers a week? Where does that come from? Well, I can tell you that the number comes from the way that they calculate the figure. So, this comes from WrestleNomics. So, February 24th, 2023, so it was last year, Warner Bros. Discovery, they touted 4 million viewers for Dynamite pretty much every week. And then they questioned it, which I was very surprised to see, especially if they have a friend that works there. In any event, they actually did what wrestling media should do, and they looked up the numbers. So they questioned Warner Bros. Discovery about this $4 million, this 4 million viewers figure. And it says, quote, we're told by Warner Bros. Discovery that the 4 million measurement refers to the number of viewers who watched at least 1 minute of TBS on Wednesday from 7 to 12 a.m. each week on average in 2022. A Warner Bros. Discovery spokesperson told WrestleNomics, "We attribute most of that success to AEW Dynamite." And then it says, Salanis, who I think is the Turner Network's president, says AEW has such an amazingly loyal and dedicated fan base that brings in more than 4 million viewers to TBS every Wednesday night. So the way that they're talking about this is not that Dynamite's ratings are so much better than everybody thinks they are. They're counting people who watch even 1 minute of any of these programs on any of these nights. And they have 3 nights of programs. So that means if you turned it to Dynamite at 10 o'clock and then it was a 5-minute overrun, then you counted towards watching at least 1 minute of AEW Dynamite. And this is why there's so many overruns, because they still get unique viewers by people watching the overrun. They still get credit for people who hang on to the remote who were watching The Big Bang Theory. Now, of course, this stuff, it might be technically true by the way that they do the math. I don't think it works for advertisers. It certainly doesn't. It doesn't even work on people like me. Even I see that, raise an eyebrow and want to start looking even deeper. But a lot of people continue to be confused by the way Warner Bros. Discovery is playing sleight of hand with these numbers. Even though they did it more than once. This is like the 2nd or 3rd time they've done this. So it's very strange that they would do that, you know, because you're in a business and it's not that you're being deceitful, but it's clearly other products that come on at around the same time that do better than AEW. I mean, Big Bang Theory is a huge lead in, and then every single week we watch how the ratings go downward. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. And even in their own statement, they say, quote, TBS ranked number 2 in cable entertainment network in Prime among adults 25 to 54, 18 to 49, and 18 to 34. The Big Bang Theory remains cable's number 1 acquired series among adults 25 to 54 and 18 to 49. So you have a show that is in reruns that clearly does better than Dynamite. This is bizarre that you would tout AEW as having 4 million viewers. Then if they have 4 million viewers based off of everybody who watched at least 1 minute, what is the viewership then for the Big Bang Theory that seems to have double the viewership of Dynamite sometimes? It's also very bizarre that you would give Dynamite the credit for Big Bang Theory's success, and Big Bang Theory is a bigger show than Dynamite. Like, it'd have been one thing if it was the other way around. Like, Dynamite gave Big Bang Theory a huge lead in. Then you would be like, oh, okay, well, Dynamite did most of the heavy lifting. But that's not what happens. Again, every single week, the ratings start to decline soon as the Big Bang Theory ends. So, it's tough. It's very tough to see how Warner Bros. Discovery is doing this. And it seems very odd to me that they would do that, considering they probably pay more for Dynamite than they do for Big Bang Theory. What's the point? So, all right, let's move on to the PW Insider part. Now, this is a double part, all right? This is 2 parts. This is going to be the PW Insider part, but also the Eric Bischoff part. You thought I wasn't going to talk about Eric Bischoff and his comment about Mercedes Moné. Of course I was. I didn't forget. But we're going to do this. So it was a question by an unknown person who I guess sends questions to PW Insider if you're that kind of person. The question is this. It's January of 2024. AEW is starting year 5. MJF is on the shelf. Adam Cole is on crutches. CM Punk and Cody Rhodes are in WWE. Kenny Omega is on the shelf. The Young Bucks are at home. Jericho is in the middle of controversy. Danielson and Sting are winding down. So here's the question. Who in the world is supposed to be the big star when they come to town? Who is carrying this thing on their back? Who is supposed to be selling the tickets and drawing eyeballs to the product. Surely AEW doesn't have the WWE mentality of the company is the draw, do they? They can't possibly think that. I would hope Tony Khan doesn't think that, because I think if you look at how they've been going for the last couple of months, they've basically been trying to do the company is the draw, or matches are the draw, which is even worse than the company being the draw, because nobody cares about wrestling matches. I know wrestling fans don't want to hear that. They want to put their fingers in their ears. No, I'm telling you, nobody cares about wrestling matches. Even wrestling fans don't really care about wrestling matches. If you watch enough wrestling, you see more than enough matches. All right. You see more than enough matches, even good ones. And they never have meant less. Wrestling matches don't mean a damn thing. You can find them all over YouTube. All right. They don't mean nothing. Here is Dave Shearer's response. He says, I wish I could tell you the company had that mentality. I really do. Tony Khan legitimately believes everything is great and they are doing their best shows ever. He is promoting when he says that. I think he believes it. I guess he says he isn't promoting. So if people stop buying tickets and watching, Tony will probably just wonder what is wrong with all the people who don't realize how great AEW is. It's fucking sad that this guy has so much going for him to help grow the business, and he just settled for booking, quote, 5-star matches that he loves. Stories and characters be damned. It's amazing that if he didn't have so much money, I don't think he would still be in business. Because there's no way you can think that. So there's a lot of people who think out there that AEW is going to turn it around. As soon as they bring in Mercedes Moné, it's going to turn around. Just like it, turned around when they brought in CM Punk, right? Or they brought in Andrade or Miro or whatever, right? Eric Bischoff says that Mercedes Moné will do nothing for AEW and that AEW is quickly becoming TNA. So he says, how many times have we seen, this was on his podcast, to interrupt myself. How many times have we seen big names come from WWE to AEW and people speculating how it's going to impact the business and what's going to happen? And nothing happens. It doesn't matter who you bring in there. He says, I'm going to make this comment again. AEW is quickly becoming TNA. He says, I got nearly a million views on that comment and it probably 500,000 responses. Everybody buried my comment and me along with it. But this is a perfect example of what I meant. We've seen so many big names come to AEW. Pick one. Let's put CM Punk off to the side. Pick anyone. The net impact of the growth of the business, other than selling t-shirts, has been zip. Nada. And then later on, he says, I said to Dixie Carter word for word, Dixie, it doesn't matter if you brought Undertaker and dropped him from the ceiling as a surprise into a TNA ring. And then John Cena. This is when they were both at the top of WWE. You have John Cena run to do the TNA ring and you shoot an angle. It won't matter. It just doesn't. Because the brand and the perception of it, the scale of it is so small that it won't get over. And that's the problem I think AEW has. They don't know how to use those big names that grows their business. It just grows their budget. But it doesn't grow their business. It just hasn't. Now, I want to separate these two concepts here. Because AEW, it cannot be TNA because it's so much bigger than TNA ever was. So the perception of AEW is much different than the perception of TNA. Yes, TNA was considered small time. WWE has done a great job, and that's one of the top pieces of WWF propaganda that I love so much. I love a lot of the Vince McMahonisms. The fact that WWF is #1 and should be considered #1, and if you don't make it here, you ain't made it nowhere, that concept has done a lot of damage to everybody else. And other people cannot get to that level in terms of perception. It got to the point, well, it's mostly because of monopoly, or put a quote-unquote monopoly, that all pay-per-view events were considered WWE events. It's like Band-Aid, Band-Aid is a brand, but it has encompassed all of bandages. That's just how it is. Like, some people down south call everything a Coke because they drink Coca-Cola so much, so everything is a Coke. That's kind of how WWE is in the marketplace. WWE is the top brand. It's just implacable. You can't move it. Everything is going to seem smaller in scale, but AEW is never going to be as small as TNA. They would have to virtually go out of business to be as small as TNA. All right. So I think he's wrong about that. I think the perception of AEW is much bigger, especially when they did bring in some names like CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole, and they were doing big shows like the Arthur Ashe shows where they was getting 20,000 people, and they did Wembley, which had like 70,000, 80,000 people. That stuff is unheard of outside of WWE. All right. You cannot discount that. I know that Eric Bischoff is, I know he's not, in the good graces of Tony Khan right now, and him and Tony Khan don't necessarily get along, but you can't discount that AEW did have a tremendous amount of momentum. But that part of that is because of Tony Khan's ability to spend money. The heavy marketing and promotion that he did for like the Grand Slam events and for the Wembley show. And having names that people know, faces that people can recognize on these shows, it greatly benefited them. Nobody ever invested that much time or effort into TNA. TNA was one of those things where it's hard to say because everybody who touched TNA had worked either in WCW or WWF. There were very rarely any people in TNA who were brought up through TNA or had come over from TNA. I think Jeremy Borash and Dixie Carter herself might have been the only ones. They tried Cornette. They tried Bruce Pritchard. They tried Vince Russo. They tried Eric Bischoff. They tried Hulk Hogan. They tried everybody. And none of that crap worked. AEW had something different. It was the elite who had never worked in a, mainstream American wrestling company, which includes Cody Rhodes, and you had Tony Khan. These guys were completely fresh. They had a completely fresh and new vision. And they had the money and the will to put into it. I don't like the idea of saying, well, they're just a new TNA. I don't like that. They put in way too much effort and had way too much success for you to just write it off as being just another TNA. You can't do that. That being said, he's still not wrong about Mercedes Moné not being able to do a goddamn thing for their company. Because this is where WWE's ability to create stars and to make big names and make a mainstream matters more than anything. Nobody is going to give a fuck about Mercedes Moné. Nobody's going to care. Because who is Mercedes Moné? They don't know. They're going to see the girl and be like, she looks familiar. Maybe I know who she is. But is that going to make people watch Dynamite? I don't think so. It may make her fan base watch Dynamite. Who, maybe they already watch it, maybe they don't. But the masses, I don't think the masses care that much. When CM Punk came over, it mattered. It made the news. Because CM Punk was a big enough star and he was gone so long from the business. And then, of course, some of the money was spent on marketing and promotions. This thing became massive. And it actually did matter. He had the same name. He had the same face. He had an attitude. He had something to say. He had angles. Of course, he had angles over time. Initially, he was basically doing Princess Diana. He was walking around waving at everybody every week. But once they started doing stuff with him, you started seeing the value. It wasn't moving the needle because he was only in one part of the show. So he wasn't like jacking everything up as much as The Rock does. He was in one segment on the show, one match on the show. Then, of course, they did the old AEW stuff where they put him in things that don't matter and that diminished him over time. But I'm talking about when he first got there. It mattered. It meant something. It petered out over time because they didn't know how to maintain it. But every name that they brought in, they have called a game changer. This is somebody who's finally going to get the opportunity that they never got before. They're going to be a huge star. Blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, nothing. It's just a high-level, high-priced talent on your roster. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to throw some people some bail on this one. Mercedes Moné has already got a lot of things against her. One, she's already known as Sasha Banks. She will forever be known as Sasha Banks. She much like Steve Urkel. Like, you know, Undertaker can't be anything but Undertaker now. So she's not going by Sasha Banks. People are probably already going to blank out. They don't care. They probably love Sasha Banks, but they don't know anything about Mercedes Moné and they ain't trying to learn. So that's already a knock against her. The second knock against her, unfortunately, is that she's female. And nobody is going to give a fuck about women's wrestling. I hate to break it to you. Hate to put it to you so raw. But a female wrestler being the face of your company and taking your company to the next level, I don't see it. I don't see it. I'll be happy if she's able to prove me wrong, but I doubt it. Because think about how much effort. She would have to have the star power of fucking Hercules and Apollo and He-Man and Goku and Superman to carry AEW from where it is now to where it was 2 years ago. Just off her name. With her being a female wrestler. It's not likely. The creative. Nobody cares about the women's wrestling in AEW. That's already a problem. It's a huge deficit to be a women's wrestler in AEW. Tony Khan does not put the time and effort in. So anybody will care about the women's division. And that's after you start talking about if people will even recognize her in a different getup. It's not like Robert De Niro is in different movies and you watch all of these different movies. That's not how this shit works, man. I know WWE has created something where they told you, and it was in plain English, they create characters much like Marvel created Captain America. They created The Undertaker. They will not put anybody else in the suit of Undertaker, even though technically they could. They will never actually do that. But they made the brand, and the brand is what made the star. And they've been saying this for years. Only a select number of people have been able to take what they've done in WWE and become as big or bigger outside. Hulk Hogan has done it. Roddy Piper, maybe. Macho Man, maybe. But most, The Rock, and even for a little while, he wasn't even using the name The Rock. But even Stone Cold Steve Austin didn't become as huge of a star outside of wrestling as he was in wrestling. So when you have a situation like that, then people only really care about you in that context. Which means you're a huge star in the context of the WWE. Outside of it, maybe not so much. And that's why when you look at somebody like CM Punk, who was a big star in AEW, but he became somehow even bigger when he went back to WWE, it's because people now see him back in the proper context. Oh, it was cool seeing him over there. It wasn't too bad. But this is where he should be. Because this is where we've already known he was. This is Michael Keaton putting Batman back on 10 years later. Christopher Reeves being Superman one more time. That's what this is. This is a revisiting of the most popular character you have ever played. You don't have that in AEW. Every time somebody goes from WWE to AEW, it's like going from a big budget Hollywood movie to a straight to DVD flick. You might be getting paid. You might still be a star. You might be good enough to carry your segment. But ultimately, the character that you left behind is what everybody was looking at. I mean, look at what's going on with Edge. It is what it is. It's not disrespect to AEW. It's a straight observation. It's straight up fucking facts. Nobody will care about Mercedes Moné unless they would have to have the fucking sun's gravity pull people to watch this product at this point in time. I don't think they can do it. And I will give Tony Khan all the credit in the world. If he can turn it around in less than 3 years. It's going to take forever to turn this thing around. It's going to take a lot of money. He's going to have to spend a lot of money to turn this thing around. And to go back to the PW Insider thing, I'm not sure if they could bring anybody in that'll change it. There's nobody you can buy at this point. You can bring in Rob Van Dam. He's too old. There's nothing you can do. There's nobody that WWE has released or has retired within the last few years who is going to jump ship. And most of them can't wrestle anyway. So you're not bringing John Cena or The Rock in there. Hogan, you've already banned him. You banned him 5 years ago. And plus, he's old as hell and can't do anything. What more did you got? The only thing you can do is spend a massive amount of time and money into making new stars. That's the only thing you can do. That's the only thing you can do. And the idea that you're going to go out and buy some free agent, it's going to be Will Ospreay. He's going to change business. No, he's not. No, he's not. Not by himself anyway. So you can go out there and pick up whoever you want. It is not going to. I said this when CM Punk was brought in. And it's not going to matter. What matters is what you do with them. Again, Hulk Hogan jumped ship to WCW. It did gangbusters initially because you see Hogan in a new context. It's different. Wow, that's the guy I saw main event WrestleMania. Now he's going to be at Bash at the Beach. I got to see what's up with that. But over time, it went down until they did something new with him. And people went along for the ride when it comes to the NWO. I don't see that element when it comes to AEW. I don't see it. I hate to break it to you. If you're an AEW fan, feel free to rub this in my face in 4 years if they've turned it around, but I don't think so. It only gets worse from here. Unless Tony Khan has a secret weapon in terms of somebody on his roster that is underappreciated, that if you put a lot of time and effort into them, they get over and become big stars, it's over with. There's not even anybody that could leave WWE right now, come over to AEW and change business. Not one person. Not Randy Orton, not LA Knight, not AJ Styles, not Finn Balor, nobody. Not a soul. Because as soon as you remove them from that WWE context, they shrink. As soon as they put that character back, because it's WWE's character, as soon as they give them that character back and they come on over as Adam Copeland or whatever, they're dead meat. It's over. You got to do something completely different and new with them and build it all over again. Are you willing to spend the money and the time and be creative enough to do it? No. If so, he did it already. He just started doing it already. He's not. This thing, I'm not going to say AEW is dead, but it's in trouble for sure. It's in trouble for sure. Dynamite. Oh, brother. So, match 1, Hangman Page versus Claudio Castagnoli. Poor Claudio. Look at the position he finds himself in. He's got to do the JOB to Hangman Page, which he did. But this match was 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Oh my God, it was so long. They tried to work every match on this show like it was a pay-per-view main event. What are they thinking? Of course, Claudio did some really awesome stuff. Bench press into the, and threw him over to, I think he threw him over to the stage area. Pretty crucial. Also a big fan of the buckshot counter. Ended up with the pop-up European uppercut. That was pretty good too. But this was one of those matches where dudes were outside the ring forever. I mean, Hangman Page was sizing him up to do something, anything, and he just ran across the platform and clotheslined him. I was like, bro, just end this match, please. So, it ends with Hangman Page hitting the the buckshot lariat to win the match. Poor Claudio. Blackpool Combat Club, they don't mean much of anything anymore, do they? Let's skip to Hangman Page's second time being in the show. But first we got to talk about Samoa Joe, because Samoa Joe says that they're changing their championship protocol, that now you need to bring your reputation and your record to the committee. And if you're good enough, you get to step in the ring with the champ. So for all of those who want a shot, he'll be waiting. So clearly Tony Khan took to heart with the stuff that he was saying on Twitter, and he's kind of rolling back the loose nature of championship challenges that he's allowed, at least for the world title. You know, because Deonna Purrazzo hasn't won anything, and she seems to be in line for a women's championship match, but okay. Again, it doesn't matter that much. But now, since he got into this tiff with USA Network, or USA Network social media intern, he's going to start trying to make these things matter. He's going to go back to trying to make wins and losses matter. Okay. Swerve interrupted and said that he took Hangman's spot and it wasn't personal. He's going to tell Joe the same thing. He just wants the title. He's going to take it. It's not personal. But if after he takes it, Samoa Joe wants to make it personal, he's fine with that. Hangman Page came out there, got in Swerve's face, said 2024 will be his year. Then turned to Samoa Joe, said to him that he's going to take that belt from him for what Joe had done to him. So let's pause right here too, because there's a lot going on in this promo. Swerve was wearing a very long, it seemed to be chinchilla coat in Jacksonville. I'm pretty sure it's not that cold, but it was kind of fly. I ain't gonna hold you up. They now starting to really position Swerve as a babyface. They're not really giving you any reason to boo him anymore. This whole it's not personal thing, instead of him trying to make it personal, or at least him trying to get people's attention. I mean, Jesus, it should be. That should be the case. He should be doing things to try to get attention on himself. But whatever. He talked about all the things that he's done so far. You know, getting his blood drank and getting into fights and stuff. Hangman Page did the same thing. Of course, when they circled back to Samoa Joe supposedly doing stuff with the Undisputed Kingdom, the stuff that was done to him. I'm guessing they mean the frame job where supposedly he was framed for hitting MJF in the head with a bottle and getting put through that windshield, which he should have just stole on Samoa Joe if that was going to be the case, right? I mean, why'd you come out there and get in his face and then say, oh yeah, you had all that stuff done to me? Like, that didn't hurt when you got put through that window? That, I just, you know, I don't know. It is what it is. Anyway, Samoa Joe's about to leave when dun dun dun, the signal occurs, and everybody's like, what the hell is that? It's a Hook signal, like Batman. It's like Hook. It's in the sky. And I'm like, huh. I don't know if I dislike it. It's unique, at least. Well, I mean, it's a ripoff of Batman, but I don't think any other wrestler has ever had anything like that. I mean, WWE in the New Generation era, they used to have those very special spotlights in the ring. Like, oh my God, that's what I loved about it. You go back to the New Generation era, you will see like the Owen Hart stuff in the ring when they turn the lights down, and Owen Hart was like the king of hearts, and there's like a heart card, and like the hearts would be floating around the ring and stuff like that. He used to do that for Bret Hart too, where the hearts would float around the ring. It was fantastic. That was good shit. I love that. The CGI crap they're trying to do now with the during the entrances, it doesn't compare. Give me some lighting fixtures or whatever. I like the projectors and stuff. That stuff sounds fun. Anyway, Hook has a signal. He walked around the ring, got in Samoa Joe's face. It made it seem kind of intense. Told Samoa Joe that he had 1 week. 1 week. And he's going to defeat Samoa Joe for the title. And Joe seems to be ready for it. And they set the match for next week, Samoa Joe versus Hook. I can't say that was bad, because it didn't screw it up. You know? So it was fine. The segment was, all in all, a little busy. They changed their championship protocol, introduced 2 new challengers, and the most recent challenger is going to be all in this place. And they still were doing stuff with Hangman and Swerve all together. It's just all this stuff mixed up in a gumbo. And that's fine. They want to have the world champion be kind of busy. So it seems like they're going to do this thing where the world champion is feuding with 2 or 3 guys at a time, which doesn't put any spotlight on any individual guy, but it's different and it's okay. It's not terrible, because Hangman Page isn't really even a legitimate contender, and Hook isn't either. But putting Hook in the ring with Joe is good. You know, I think it's a good look, especially since Samoa Joe was booked as Mini Taz in TNA for a time. If you guys don't remember that, where, you know, Taz was his mentor. I'm surprised they didn't bring that. Like, that would be a good thing to bring up in terms of storyline, wouldn't it? There was a short time there where Samoa Joe was mentored by Taz, and that was in TNA. You know, it was back when they kept changing AJ Styles' persona, where he was Little Christian, then he was Little Nature Boy, then They didn't know what they wanted to do with him. Everybody from TNA had to be a little version of somebody you knew from WWE. And they chose Taz for Samoa Joe. So there's some history there. Would have been nice if they'd have used it, but they didn't. Oh well. Second match on the show was a nothing 8-man tag. I'm sorry. Orange Cassidy, Dustin Rhodes, Preston Vance, and Edge. What a team. Wow. Versus Brian Cage, Gates of Agony, and Lance Archer. I'm not even going to lie to you. I'll probably watch two seconds of this thing. Preston Vance was in this match. What the fuck is he doing here? Orange Cassidy's team wins. Who cares? Nothing matters. Bullet Club Gold backstage. They want championships. Acclaimed approached them, said that they have shared enemies, and that they want to hold Gold with the Bullet Club Gold, and suggested they combine forces to create Bang Bang Scissor Gang. Jay White says he'll think about it. And so they're about to turn Bullet Club Gold babyface. Here's the thing. The Kingdom were out there a little bit later and nobody did anything. They just chilled. I mean, I don't know. Roderick Strong later in the show defeated Brian Keith. And then Adam Cole sat in the middle of the ring, cut the same promo he cut last week about putting over the same guys, saying the same mission statement that Roderick Strong wants to be the international champion. Taven and Bennett are the Ring of Honor tag team champions. They're the greatest tag team of Ring of Honor of all time. And Wardlow's going to be the world champion. Same thing he said last week. It's hard to take this thing seriously when, one, Bullet Club Gold nor the Acclaimed came out there and got in their faces after this. Two, it involves the Ring of Honor tag team championships, which are at best mid-card tag team titles. So you went through, how many months did this Devil storyline go? And you don't go anywhere near the world champion. In fact, he might be helping you. I don't know how that works. MJF is now gone. That probably was not part of the plan, but he is now gone. The other guys who were jumped in this storyline seemingly have no interest because you don't need to join forces. It's literally 3 of these guys, and it's 3 members of the Acclaimed, and it's 3 members of Bullet Club Gold. What do you need to join forces for? Who's doing this math? Adam Cole is injured. He's only got 1 goddamn leg. At best, he's got 1 leg. You guys, okay. Look, poor Jay White. Poor Jay White. He signed up to AEW, and look what happened to him. This Brian Keith guy. I want to talk about this for a second, just a second. I'm not gonna spend too much time on him. He's giving me Commander vibes. You know, Tony Khan. Every couple of months he finds some new indie wrestler that he falls in love with, and he puts them on every single card. They always lose, but they're always there. It was Commander. It was El Hijo del Vikingo. It was somebody else a couple of months ago. But he just keeps using them and keeps using them and keeps using them. And he keep beating them and keep beating them and keep beating them. And then eventually he actually signs them. But at that point, you've seen them on TV get beat so many times that they're fucking useless. You don't even want to see him anymore. That's basically what we're getting to this Brian Keith guy. I've seen this guy on this show like 6 times. He's lost 7 times. All right? This is ridiculous. If you're going to feature the guy and you're thinking about signing him or doing something with him, if you got him traveling with the rest of the crew, fucking sign the guy and then put him over. Do something with him to make people interested in him. Otherwise, they're going to just look at him and say, oh, he's a job guy. And then as soon as you sign him, how does that change that he's a job guy? It doesn't. You can't do this to people, man. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to give you a tryout on TV. And then you be like, you lose every goddamn match. If you're going to do tryouts, do dark matches. Don't do the stuff on TV. Perception is reality. I said the same thing when they were doing this to Dragon Lee in WWE. Like, what was the point of you bringing this guy in? You're just going to beat him 100 times. You know, it literally doesn't make any sense. If you're going to use a guy and put him over, then put him over. What's your big deal here? What's your issue? But this devil thing seems to be dead in the water already. Without nobody to oppose them, there's no conflict on this show. And that's, people don't understand, that is the lifeblood of storytelling. It's the lifeblood of television. Everything you watch on television is driven off conflict. Whether it's the news, whether it's sports, whether it's TV, even if it's like Cocomelon, they still bring some kind of conflict into the story, into the product, in some way. You introduced this devil storyline. There's tons of conflict there. There's tons of potential for conflict. You completely avoided conflict here. You didn't even have Samoa Joe mention that Wardlow wants to take the belt from him. You didn't even mention that. That'd have been something that Samoa Joe should have been able to work with. That in the past, young Adam Cole and I had an alliance, but now I see he wants my world championship. Well, I think young Adam should rethink that or something, anything. Create some conflict that might be interesting in this situation. Because this devil thing that you invested so much time in is going to be done for with no conflict. Nobody cares about Roderick Strong and Orange Cassidy. Especially since Orange Cassidy is not going to be confronting, that's such a weird thing too, because it's really got me worked up now. Orange Cassidy agreed to fight a guy who didn't even formally challenge him 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? A guy was like, man, I'm on a winning streak. I want to fight for a championship. Orange Cassidy, I accept. You're like, damn, the guy didn't even challenge you yet. And he's like, you just jumping right on it. This is the second time that Adam Cole has mentioned that Roderick Strong wants to fight him for the belt. Orange Cassidy, nothing. Nothing. Again, I don't even care about that belt. It's about things that make sense. The more conflict you have on your product, the better. Just not enough conflict in this devil storyline. And this thing already went too long. So they need to find some very, very quickly. Toni Storm is backstage and she's with Mariah May. They asked if Toni Storm watched Mariah May's match. She did not. And Mariah May started kind of pouting about it, so Toni Storm gave her some chocolate. Then she was asked about Deonna Purrazzo, and she mispronounced Purrazzo's name on purpose and said it sounds very Italian. And she kind of almost barfed at the idea. And then said that reach out to her people, they want to have a meeting. Later in the show, Deonna Purrazzo said that she'll have her people contact Toni Storm's people. And then she said she's going to have her debut on Collision, to which Red Velvet just happened to walk into the shot and say, I'm going to make my Collision debut this Saturday. What do you say, me and you mix it up? And I'm like, you already screwing this thing up, huh? You brought Deonna in as a babyface. Red Velvet's a babyface. Already, you screwed this up. Once again, there's just not enough conflict. You have the opportunity of doing something special with Deonna Purrazzo. Why not get some heat? Why not have Mariah May attack her from behind or something like that? You don't have to have the match immediately, but you could have Mariah May attack her from behind or something for ruining her debut. They did a segment last week where Mariah May cut a promo about how Deonna Purrazzo debuted during her debut, and it's, how can you do that? And that kind of frustrated her and made her really upset. She could have just attacked Deonna Purrazzo during her promo and said, that's for, interrupting my debut. And then she could play chicken shit heel running from Deonna for a couple of weeks, and then eventually they have the match and Deonna wins, and that's kind of how you build toward Deonna towards Toni. But just having them talk about each other in separate segments, that's fine if these people were already over. But you're trying to get this angle over. You're trying to introduce Deonna Purrazzo. You're trying to get people to give a shit about this. You got to introduce some conflict. You got to introduce some heat. You got to introduce something here. And it has to be good. It can't just be a thing. It has to be entertaining. And none of this crap is entertaining. The closest thing to entertainment I had on this show was Samuel Guevara versus Ricky Starks. The Ricky Starks is fun. It's fun to watch him. He lost to Samuel Guevara. Oh my God. Oh. They shook hands after the match, which was an oddball thing considering Ricky Starks is a heel. Big Bill then attacked Sammy Guevara from behind, which led to Chris Jericho coming out there, and they blasted Judas so loud for so long that it was humorous and cartoonish how loud and how long they played Judas. Look, everybody knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to drown out the boos, but there wasn't that many boos. I was listening for them and I didn't hear them. And it wasn't because there was nothing but Judas playing. I looked at the crowd. I didn't see people like with their thumbs down and all that. I didn't see a lot of that. You know, I think that they're overreacting. You know, they're overcorrecting this situation. They still are going to have these guys work a live match on Saturday. Tag team championship match. Okay. Ricky Starks, man, I know he's just counting his days. That Pro brother, man, he's been counting his days, boy. he's just sitting there with a calendar, checking the days, like, damn, you know, day after day. There's no reason why he couldn't have beat Sammy Guevara, unless we were trying to. I'm guessing they're going to 50-50 book it. Sammy wins this match, but they're going to end up losing the tag team championship match. And that way it's going to stay 50-50 kind of. But this is that pillar shit. These guys suck. And then you just give up on them. The pillars, they're trash. I don't know what to tell you. Next was, oh my God. Willow Nightingale, Chris Statlander, Anna Jay, and Thunder Rosa versus Saraya, Ruby Soho, Sky Blue, and Julia Hart. I watched 2 things on this. Well, 3. I watched Thunder Rosa's entrance. I watched Julia Hart's entrance. And I watched the finish. And that was pretty much it. I had better things to do. You know, these 8-man tags that they just threw on here for almost literally no reason. I don't understand the point of them. Like, I really don't. I understand that what they were trying to do is we're going to create matches in which we could put over friends of Brody Lee. So Preston Vance gets to be on the winning team earlier, and Anna Jay gets to be on the winning team here. But, nah. For starters, Anna Jay winning this match meant nothing, because she never wins any other time. Every time you see her, she's losing. So we're going to keep putting people over in tribute matches. The crazy thing is, I forgot to mention this earlier, is when it comes to Preston Vance, somebody says that, I think, was it Tony Schiavone who said that, was it Brody Lee who they claimed took him from being a mid-card guy and made him a top-level star? Because I don't remember that occurring. I don't remember Preston Vance ever being a top-level guy. You know, right now, he's a henchman for Roosh. Like, literally, he's a henchman for God. But I get what the point is. They wanted to celebrate Brody Lee. But this ain't the way to do it, man. These might have been feel-good matches for AEW fans. So maybe it's not for me. You know, maybe I'm not the audience for this. Wheeler Yuta cut a promo saying that he's nobody's young boy. He won 9 straight matches on Rampage. And that he challenged fat, stupid ass Eddie Kingston on Rampage to a Pure Rules match. Okay, whatever. Eddie Kingston's title already doesn't mean anything, right? Might as well have him wrestle Wheeler Yuta on Rampage. Eddie Kingston's just not going to touch anybody who's main event anymore. Look at the tournament. The tournament featured Jon Moxley, Claudio Castagnoli, Andrade, El Idolo, Swerve Strickland. But since that tournament ended, Eddie Kingston is wrestling Trent Beretta and Wheeler Yuta. Where's the energy at in this thing? Nobody else wants this belt. You know, how about you could have had maybe one of those devil dudes like Roderick Strong wants this belt, this Continental Classic crown thing, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to help him out. because this thing is dead in the water already. It's not even featured on the show. It's already been bumped to Rampage. It's been in existence 2 weeks, and it's already near the bottom of the toy box. It's dealing with Wheeler Yuta, for Christ's sake. Ugh. Yikes. The main event of the show, Sting and Darby Allin defeat Powerhouse Hobbs and Konosuke Takeshita. Sting, 60 plus years old, does a scorpion death drop off of a stage through a table and pins Powerhouse Hobbs. Oh my God. Darby Allin, of course, leaped off of a structure onto Takeshita. Ric Flair got involved and was doing some chops. It was a tornado tag match with no disqualification. Sting, I got to give him credit for being the guy who was willing to do the things that he's doing. He's incredible for doing the stuff that he's been doing at 60 plus years old. But Tony Khan is an absolute fucking moron for putting Sting in matches where he could potentially get hurt and not make the final show. He's 60, Tony. All right? At any given time, what seems like a safe bump can turn into his knees not working anymore, his hip being busted, or like every time they have Sting wrestling in these nonsense ass matches, like he wrestled fucking JD Drake. They wrestled the Workhorsemen. Like, why are they wrestling these guys? Well, Sting's got to have a world tour on his way out the door, but he's got to waste time wrestling JD Drake. I mean, Anthony Henry got to get his hands on Sting before Sting leaves. You really that was a waste of Sting's bumps. That's so stupid. I know that you probably trust the guys. They're veterans. They've been around for a long time. But perception is reality. JD Drake, for crying out loud. For crying out loud. He looks like he shops at Save-A-Lot. I mean, he is the most redneck looking pro wrestler I've seen this side of Trevor Murdoch. I'm talking big bellied, full of Bud Light. He's got a keg in his trunks. And this guy gets to wrestle Sting. That's crazy to me. That's crazy that you would book that match to me. Instead of trying to protect your investment. And I get you trying to do what's best for the fans. You're trying to show that the fans, you're going to get to see Sting for one last time. It's going to be his last match in this town, last match in this town. But at least give him quality opponents. When they did Ric Flair's last matches in WWE, he was wrestling like Carlito and Mr. Kennedy and, you know, guys who were MVP, guys who were like right there in the mid card. They weren't like the trash of the company, you know? Like he wasn't wrestling like, who would have been trash? Like Rodney Mack or something. I don't know. Was he even around at that time? He wasn't wrestling guys on that tier. He wasn't wrestling like the smaller guys in the Spirit Squad or anything like that. It's a waste of his bumps. It's a waste of his bumps. You know, so, okay. So after the match, Tony Schiavone wants to ask Sting who his final opponent will be. And then we get the Young Bucks, their music play, and they come out and the two of them have decided to grow mustaches. And one wearing black, the other is wearing white. And they've got mustaches. They look like Mario and Luigi in a Tubi movie. And we keep hearing, this is the new look Young Bucks. They look like the Spy versus Spy from Mad TV. These fucking guys, what are they doing? I told them to go away and to reconnect. Go away and reinvent yourself. They took go away, grow a mustache, and then come back. Bro, if you don't get the fuck out of here, all right? They look like idiots. Now, in terms of Sting's final opponents, the Young Bucks are not a bad option. But see, here's the thing. If Darby and Sting were wrestling like the Hardy Boys, with who they probably should have wrestled on Collision, and they were wrestling FTR, and they were wrestling some of the other teams, you know, House of Black and those kinds of guys, then the final tour might actually feel a little bit better. I feel a little bit better about it. But look, like Hobbs and Takeshita, that's not bad. I'm not even complaining that Hobbs lost to 60-year-old Sting, because I get it. It's Sting's last go round. Go ahead and, you know, he's going to win. You can't beat him. So you give him the rub. You put Hobbs in there. He looks strong. He was carrying Sting around, all that stuff. Hobbs takes the L because you're trying to protect Takeshita because of Omega and that eventual thing that they're going to do. Fine. But for the Young Bucks to be the end game, I know a lot of people are kind of bitching about that, but the preeminent tag team in AEW are the Young Bucks. Even if they're not the champions, they're the guys who started the company. They are going to pull some strings and be Sting's last opponents. I don't have no problem with that. I honestly don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. What I do hate is Sting wrestling the Workhorsemen. That's what I hate. I hate that there are so many opportunities to do so many other things that could be cool, and you choose not to do that. I hate that, you know, you could have discussed maybe Edge wanting to be partners with Christian because he wants to be Sting's final opponent. And that could have been something cool they could have done together and something they could have lived through. It was an opportunity to do some really cool shit with Sting and Darby, and this being their last run. They could have wrestled Rob Van Dam and Hook. They could have done anything that could have been fun, where Sting could have gave a rub to people who not only he worked with them before in TNA, like Rob Van Dam, or a guy, and Jeff Hardy, or guys that AEW are trying to really boost up, like Hobbs and Takeshita. You have him taking bumps from fucking guys that nobody cares about. Literally dumb. So when I look at how things have been going so far, the Young Bucks ain't the worst option you got out there. I'm okay with it. There's a lot of people who are saying it should be FTR, and maybe it should be. But I'm okay with the Young Bucks pulling this card and saying, all right, it's us. You know, we're gonna put our balls on the table. It's us. We're the last guys. All right, fine. But we also have a lot of time between now and Revolution, so maybe they will wrestle the Hardy Boys and FTR and all of them at you know, on television and Collision and everything. But I'm just looking at this thing at the Young Bucks being the final destination. All right, they're considered the greatest tag team in AEW or something like that, right? So why not? I can't think of a good reason why you wouldn't do it. You know, so whatever. We got some bonus segments for those of you who lasted this long, so stay tuned. I said I wasn't going to talk about Brawl Out anymore, and I truly don't care that much about Brawl Out. But DJ Who Kid apparently was there and decided he was going to talk about it on a podcast on Sirius XM Radio with Jim Norton and Sam Robert. I haven't been able to hear the audio myself, so we have to go with Fightful, who posted the quotes. So we all know what happened. The Jack Perry goes backstage and then shit jumps off. So DJ Who Kid, who apparently is friends with, I think, Swerve and maybe some other guys backstage in AEW, he says, you already know what happened in the back. It was straight Brawl City. I'm not going to talk about that. Blood and killing and death. And then he says, I was right there. We were next. They put us to be ready to go. It was crazy. It's ongoing, they told me. This has been an ongoing. This was the last straw. It was the biggest moment for AEW, and I guess he was trying to sabotage that moment. He was trying to go out there. I'm in the middle. I'm a fly on the wall. It was very intense. I always thought it was fake and all this shit. It's more real. It was wrestling back there. A DDT, everything. I'm exaggerating. There was a yelling moment where he was like, fuck this. This is our moment. Everybody get the fuck out there and do your shit. I was like, I don't wrestle. But I was about to go out there. It was very intense. I will always respect wrestling after I saw that. The big guy, the Hawaiian looking dude, it was the guy going ham, and I was like, oh shit. Then blood was everywhere from the fight before that. They came in and they were bleeding. I was like, what is going on around here? This was intense. So a whole bunch of fucking nothing. He gave you no fucking details except for it was intense. And, you know, the big Hawaiian dude was yelling orders, I guess. You don't see, the crazy thing is he's not a fan, so that he has no reason to lie. But also, he doesn't know any of the players, right? So he doesn't know who to say is doing what, right? Like, the only thing we can get out of this is that the big Hawaiian-looking dude was back there, which we already know Samoa Joe would help break it up, which is what we've heard in terms of the dirt sheets. But he's saying that somebody was yelling about, fuck this is our moment, everybody get the fuck out there and do your shit. That doesn't sound like Tony Khan to me. Who is taking control in that moment? Is that Samoa Joe? Because it sound like it might be. And then he says, I guess he was trying to sabotage that moment. The biggest moment for AEW. Was he trying to say CM Punk was trying to sabotage their big moment? Because why the fuck would he do that? He even if he was just mad at Jack Perry, why would he? Part of this is what he did. Part of this was his effort, his blood, his sweat, his tears up to that point. The injuries. I think he had broken his foot or something like that. He had broken his foot and had a bunch of other injuries leading to this moment at Wembley Stadium. Why would he decide now, all of a sudden, to nuke it? I don't know. But this is one man's perception. This is the most information we've got, and it's literally nothing. You know? So, at least we do know that something actually happened. So, from there, we actually get more information on a story that has been floating around because of Brian Last of Jim Cornette's podcast, who says that he knew about Chris Jericho getting punched out on one of his cruises. Now, I'm probably going to end up doing maybe a more in-depth video on this, but I'm going to do a short version. In about 2019, 2020, Chris Jericho and MVP got into a political debate. This boiled over until, I think, about 2022, where they kept going back and forth with each other. So, Bodyslam.net put out a story on January the 10th, claiming that MVP was the guy who punched out Chris Jericho on Chris Jericho's Rockin' Rager back in January of 2020. This, of course, comes out of the infamous, I'm pretty sure you guys heard the story of Chris Jericho and MVP having an argument to which it seemed like it was going to get heated and aggressive and physical, and Jericho saying that I don't fight jobbers and getting into his lobby. That was after Dynamite in Houston. I don't know where they would have been when this Rockin' Rager happened. Apparently they were on the ship. And apparently Jericho got knocked out by MVP on the ship. Neither MVP nor Jericho at time of recording has said anything about this. So now we could take it with a grain of salt. But everybody is now championing MVP for punching Chris Jericho in the face and all this sort of stuff, which is interesting. You know, it's interesting what you can do and what you can get away with and what people will support, as long as it's against, quote unquote, the right people. And Jericho is like the enemy of the moment. So anything you do to Chris Jericho right now is going to be supported, you know, and people are going to pat you on the back for it. So apparently we never heard anything about Jericho getting punched out at the Rockin' Rager. But let's talk about, because usually Jericho invites people to this Rockin' Rager, right? Now, I went and looked to see who else was here, because I wanted to see if any wrestling media was there. Because remember, I think when they did it, Dynamite on that ship, which was very fucking cool, by the way, the visual of them doing Dynamite on the ship, that was very cool. When they did that, wrestling media was there, like Fightful, and I think Wrestling Observer Newsletter was there. So I went to look, and yes, it is 2020, and MVP and Booker T is also on the ship, and Jericho's on the ship. The only people from wrestling media I see was Conrad Thompson and Eric Bischoff. But I haven't heard from any of these people who are very talkative with their own podcasts that anything actually happened. You know, I would imagine if Jericho really got knocked out on his ship, word would have spread. You know, I know I would have talked about it. I'd be like, hey, you see Jericho get knocked out? Shit, ahoy ye matey. He made that nigga roll, walk the plank. Anyway, it's amazing because this thing is a nice little time capsule. Because you can look back and you can tell that Bischoff is persona non grata these days because he, you know, has been doing a lot of attacking of AEW. Booker T works for WWE. Vicky Guerrero was on that ship, and God knows what the hell they think of her nowadays. Santana and Ortiz are not even friends anymore. You know, Joey Janela is not in the company anymore. He's not. Same thing for QT Marshall. Same thing for Marco Stunt. But anyway, so if it happened, they were arguing over a political debate, apparently, because that's really what their beef started over. Was apparently Jericho saying that he's not a political person, and MVP, you know, disagreeing with him. And this would have been, they had the disagreement in 2020 about the election, where Jericho was complaining about how long it takes to, you know, figure out who the president is. He still invited MVP onto his ship, even after that argument, apparently. I don't know if it was, I don't know, like, I'll have to look at the dates. That's why I say I probably have to do a longer video on it. I'll have to look at the dates. But he still had MVP on the ship. And apparently this is where Jericho got knocked out by MVP. But the other confrontation was 2 years later in Houston. And from what I was able to see, and that's where Jericho says, I don't fight jobbers. So that means that MVP had already punched Jericho out when they got into it in the hotel in Houston. Well, that was very busy. That was very involved. Yeah, well, Brian Last is going to confirm or deny the story eventually, and I'll probably end up doing a longer form video at that point. But as of right now, MVP, you know, I think dude spent, what, 15 years in prison or something like that? Like, he's a real knucklehead. And he does, like, jiu-jitsu tournaments, and, you know, he's not a punk, you know? Jericho is not a punk either. I think Booker T at the time when this thing kind of came up, he said basically, like, these are two grown men. They know how to handle themselves, and he didn't see what occurred, and he didn't know anything about it. Because I remember Booker T talking about it, and I looked it up. I'll have to find out what he exactly said. But I would have noticed, I would have remembered anyway, if Booker T would have said that, you know, MVP punched Jericho in the face. So the dirt sheets are saying that MVP punched Jericho out. This likely will not be independently verified unless, you know, this is the same story that Brian Last heard, but still that's secondhand information. We need like a primary source, somebody who was on the ground floor, somebody who was there, who saw it, you know, and that's always better. I know wrestling media is too used to the secondary sources. You know, this guy said this and somebody overheard that. You know, it's not that important that we know that whether Jericho got punched out or not, but I wouldn't be lying to you if I didn't say I was interested. I'm 100% interested to know if Jericho got punched out on his own cruise ship. And it's no doubt probably happened because he was drunk as fuck. Because he's a drinking ass fool, and he was drunk a lot at the time. That was during his little bit of the bubbly era. A little bit of the bubbly, where all kind of crazy things happened. But Jericho's known for being a hothead. He's a guy who went after Goldberg. He's a guy who got in the face of Brock Lesnar. I could see him maybe getting a little testy with MVP and getting his I's dotted and his T's crossed, you know. And, you know, things happen. People get into fights, man. You know, I don't know why they got into a fight on a cruise ship. Were there no bitches around? Did Booker T the only guy who brought his wife, for Christ's sake? You on a cruise ship and you want to argue about Donald Trump with fucking Chris Jericho? What the hell kind of, you know, like what kind of shit is that? I know MVP got to be a realer nigga than that. He got to be. Ain't no way. If you're Chris Jericho, for Christ's sake, how bad was that trip if you got knocked out on it? Anyway, we'll figure out more information. Then I'll do a longer video on the Jericho MVP thing. I just wanted to get my initial thoughts out there. Same thing with the DJ Who Kid story. It's a whole lot of nothing, no real details. We don't know who was yelling what because he didn't give any details over who was yelling what. This was Tony Khan fearing for his life because Jack Perry is slinging his HIV around as there's blood everywhere because he was bleeding in the match and then immediately got into a scuffle backstage. Tony Khan's afraid for his life, man. I mean, what can you do when men are throwing punches at each other, even if one of them is like 5'9" and Jack Perry, if he's even that, he's probably more like 5'6". You know, fear for your life. All right, thanks to everybody for sticking around as long as you did. I appreciate you. Thank you guys. I'll talk to you guys later.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression. The best don't